Five, six, seven, eight. Hey, everybody. It's the Smart and Public Podcast.
Mm. That's a good one. Let's do that again.
Thank you. Maybe I'll just like save that as a recording and just put it into the
That can
into
be
the
our
beginning.
We're still 37 episodes in, have not got music.
How much does that drive Andrew nuts?
He gets pretty annoyed. He's like, I told you that from the beginning. And I'm like, yep, still working on it. Work in
It's
progress.
it's never gonna happen. Well, today, I feel like when it's just Duffy and I, it's just gonna be hot takes from
Hot
now
take.
on. That's how we're
Hot,
doing this now.
yeah. Yeah.
As
We're
soon as
just going
it's hot.
everything, pick something every week and just rip it.
What we found today, what that we wanted to rip into was this article on Substack that we both kind of became semi-obsessed with when we read it. It's from Kira Klaas, who is the head of corporate marketing for Later. And she wrote this article called You Are the Brand Now. And we wanted to just kind of dive into this because it talks a lot about personal brand, corporate trust, corporate leadership, and like what does it mean for how we're thinking about not only talking about our businesses, but the strategy that, marketing and comms and advertising teams are all taking. And then also some of the things that, you put your crisis hat on and think about what are the implications of what this looks like for the future and like what do we need to be looking.
Yeah. It's a really interesting article. And I think and we'll break it down, but we'll also put a link when we post this because I think everyone should go read it, and shout out to Kira for kind of packaging it up in such a way that we can digest it. But yeah, I'm excited to dive in. I thought it would. Sorry.
If you guys were looking for a professional
That's just my husband calling me. Hold on.
he knows.
It's
He
all
knew we
good.
were talking about him.
Yeah, it's all good. Yeah, his ears were burning.
Yeah. Okay. Should I should I just go in and like read some of the bits and set this up and then we can like check in?
Let's do some reading for our listeners.
Okay, everybody knows how I go already with reading, so just like give me some grace. Okay, so she kind of sets this up, so I'm just going to read some little snippets, but from her position, she's got this front row seat into a rapidly unfolding shift in corporate strategy that many of us has felt, but few brand teams have fully leaned into. So here's some of the facts that she's kind of laid out. Traditional advertising is steadily losing effectiveness. Consumer trust in institutions has been trending down for years. CPM prices are up and algorithms change faster than ever, and AI generated imagery is flooding the market, but not necessarily driving conversation. So, kind of with all that noise, what's left, what's still working, and kind of her bottom line here is creators, but not all the types of creators that we think about. It's what she likes to think about it as real people. Like remove the jargon. It's people that are driving this forward. So there's a lot of people that have been talking about this of like people are the new brands, like the Scott Galloways of the world who already have been talking about this for a while and also are their own brands as people as well. So individuals are increasingly more influential than the brands or the companies they represent or partner with. And this is a shift that is no longer just relevant for influencers, defined here kind of as people with enough social reach that a brand will pay them for exposure. But it's more about personalized content creators who don't have a full-time day job. So the shift is impacting everyone in today's workforce, from executives to entry-level employees, freelancers to full-time staff. She says your brand now matters just as much as your skills do, or maybe even
Controversial.
controversial.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think what I took from it is kind of this. So two things. I think the framing she had around why this has happened, and I think this kind of decline in institutional trust. And she references the Edelman Trust Barometer, which we've talked about before as well. But we are seeing this decline in institutions, in the trust in institutions, but the trust in people has remained fairly stable, right? Then you've got this kind of wave of we had the pandemic, people were put into remote work, a lot of people started side hustles. And so this idea of being a creator kind of took off.
Mm-hmm.
We've had influencers for a while, and influencers aren't going away, but this move that like individuals can be creators as well, that it isn't necessarily, they're not an influencer as such, and that those individuals are part of brands and companies. And so your employees are now creators and are often doing content about their work or their place of work. And then you've got this move, which I think is the really interesting one that we're starting to see now, we've talked about on the pod, is like executives as creators and having that direct engagement with their audience, whoever that might be. So CEOs doing this, different levels of executive. So I thought that was really interesting, is like the why it happened, and then what does that mean for today, and that people are the new brand, I think is really, and the Scott Galloway article actually is really interesting. So will also link that. But I think when she says like your personal brand is more important than the skill set, maybe even more, I don't know if I'm there yet.
Yeah.
I don't know if I agree with that fully. I think that sort of also paints us into a corner where if you're not someone who wants to build or is able or is comfortable building, a really strong personal brand in the external world, that doesn't mean you don't have the skills to do certain roles, right? And so I think I just want to caution, personally, I would be looking at like, yes, it's great to see if someone has a great personal brand and what that could be for your business or in your team, but like don't discount that there might be some introverts with really great skill sets who don't want to do this. But I think for effect, it's a great line in the article and it's something to think about, but I'm not sure it's fully true yet.
Yeah. And to bake that out a little bit further, something that she kind of talks about is, I've worked with brilliant product marketers, strategists who have struggled to gain recognition while watching others with strong personal brands secure high profile opportunities, despite having less experience or being flat out worse at the job. So the gap often isn't skill, it's visibility, which you see so much. Like you see the people on LinkedIn at events and taking pictures. You see anyone that you're at an event and you get to stand next to Mark Benioff and you take a picture, and it almost like associates with like I'm in the group, or things like that as well. Like I think that people really lean on that when they're trying to think about their external personal brand versus actually when you're doing that messaging like on your platforms, what is the actual value that we're driving? But people start to compare themselves to others. So even that person with the picture of the executive next to them, people think I'm being left behind.
Yes.
And there's that sense of urgency, and then it almost feeds shittier content.
Yeah, no, it's funny, like that resonates really strongly with me. I think when you've worked in quite a high growth kind of fast moving tech companies, there is a lot of like that going on, I think, both in people's external platforms, so like what they're sharing on LinkedIn and Instagram and all that sort of stuff, but also internally what opportunities they're going for, on stage, like doing. And it's like, if that isn't your natural habitat, it can feel really like, but I'm not going to get the thing if I don't go and get good at this. And even as a comms person, I've had people say to me, I don't really want to do that. That's not really who I am. But like, if I don't do it, then I'm not going to get the next. And it's like, wow. Like, and so as a comms team, it was even about trying to figure out, because you'd have people beating down your door to do it who you maybe didn't want to do it. So it was always that hard choice.
I also feel like this is a sweeping generalization. You know that I love this. But I feel like a lot of the people that are so eager to kind of go and share out are also the people that have just the surface level expertise. It's those high. You like that one?
I'm like, whoa, that's brutal, Katie Boyton. Maybe true.
It's that comparison rabbit hole, as she like. Is that super cynical? Am I terrible for saying that?
I think there is definitely a proportion of people that sit in that space. And I think this is why this topic is so interesting, right? Because I think we are moving to a world where individuals are having, and people are becoming more important than the brand itself.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily new. Like, I think, you know, for a long time, I mean, it's like sports companies have always used athletes.
Yeah.
We've always said, you know, if we're telling a story to the media, what's the human side of it? Who's the customer at the end of it? Like, let's go find that individual. You know, I remember there was a story we were trying to do with Australia Post, and we were like, what's the postie side of this? Like, who's at the very end of this, the human at the end? So I don't think that's new. But what is new is this like move where it's like, I think, into this B2B enterprise corporate space, beyond influencers. It's like CEOs and employees. I think it's really interesting from a brand perspective when your employees are creating content and are active in these channels. And obviously the workforce is getting younger and they are very used to their whole lives being lived on a platform, essentially. And so this intermingling of their personal brand and their personal lives with their work lives is becoming more prevalent. And I think that's going to get really interesting.
Yeah. And she even talks about, you know, and I'd love to hear your perspective from a B2B point of view on this too, but as businesses invest more in individual voices over institutional channels, personal brand becomes a competitive advantage for professionals at every level. So companies are hiring executives with strong LinkedIn followings, partnering with employees who have engaged audiences, and recognizing that their team members' personal brands can drive business outcomes in ways that traditional corporations can't.
Yeah.
And like, that's where my point comes in, is like, what if the employees all talk and they're not actually good at their job? Like the people, like, sure, they could have a lot of good followings, but the people that work with them see that and they are angry, or that like comparison rabbit hole comes into play where they're like, she can't even deliver on her timelines. And here she is like getting all this, you know.
Yeah. Out posting on TikTok. Yeah. Look, I think it's, you know, it's really interesting. I think there's great power in it. I think, like everything, I worry about building a workforce that is one type of person, right? And the reality is, for many reasons, some people may not want to be on these platforms. And that can be right up at the executive level, but it could be, you know, you don't know what people's personal lives are. Maybe they don't want to be on a public platform for a particular reason. And I'm thinking like people who maybe have come out of a domestic violence situation, don't want to be out there. I don't know. I'm trying to think of, but like, I don't particularly want my life all over a platform.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not on TikTok, as we know. I'm barely on Instagram, and I do a bit of LinkedIn. But like, I'm not someone who craves that per se. And so I worry that if we are hiring people and we're looking at like, oh, I'm going to get that person because their reach is really great, are we missing out on a subsector of people? But so that's like my be careful. But I think it is really interesting to think about your employees as brand storytellers.
100%.
And so there is this layer, I think, that is really powerful, because often your employees are the most passionate. They're the ones that are power users usually. And this is all like, I mean, I'm trying to think of a B2B example, but like in a consumer world, if you had like a massive sneakerhead who was working for Nike.
Yeah.
Nike.
That's Nike.
Yeah, I know, like Nike. Like, yeah, that would, and who had a huge social following, that would be a massive asset to that business, right?
Yeah.
That person is naturally posting and naturally in this sneaker world. The B2B example, like, you know, I think
Got a good B2B example.
Yeah.
So a good B2B example for me is like any kind of developer platform. So you think about like, you know, the Databricks community, and if they have some star developers who are in that industry day to day, then they have huge followings. That's why we have developer relations. That's why they're the ones doing the YouTube videos and the demos, and they're at all the community meetups and that sort of thing. Like that's where that really plays a huge play.
And if you had someone who was already leading a bunch of stuff in that community, in that developer world, and you hired them, what an asset, right?
Totally.
So like, I think it definitely makes sense. And I just don't think it should be an overall hiring practice that says we're only going to kind of look for people who can help us. You know, I think you just got to find those those diamonds in your organization that already exist, they're bound to be there, then leverage them versus like making it a practice to be like, we only want these type of people.
Yeah, because and I think executives struggle with this as well. Like, I think, I think there are senior executives that I work with, even with my clients, that they will do it, but they hate the personal branding stuff because they think it feels inauthentic. They hate doing interviews because what they want to be doing is having their team, or, like, they want to be pumping up their team and giving them opportunities.
Yeah.
So like that's the other side of it that I see, is that founders or CEOs that are resistant because they think that their team should be the star and that they just want to operate.
Yeah. And I think when you get to that level, often that is what you want to do. You want to just like run the business and do it really. And like, I think we are in a world now where maybe that's not enough. Like I do think
No.
a CEO but
I
I
push back so hard on that.
How do you, and also like, I do think we have to be careful at that level. We've seen in the US, the shooting of the CEO from the healthcare company, the insurance company. That's an extreme example. But I do think CEOs need to think about their own privacy and their own safety and being really exposed. Some are not comfortable with that, which I understand, right? So I think and this is with everyone, there's a line that like, where is people's comfort levels? But I do think from a brand perspective, we've moved beyond you're not going to do it. Like, I just don't think that's an option anymore. People want to know who's behind these companies, who are the people, that authenticity. But maybe it is a case of saying, well, maybe you don't do it for everything, but every earnings, you are going to do a video and you're going to talk about it. And we're going to do some stuff that's really, direct to audience. But yeah, I think there is a subsect of CEOs that just really don't crave this. And then there's others do. Yeah.
I feel like the CEOs that don't crave it are always the ones that are the best at it.
Usually. I think the other thing that I find interesting is like people move on, right? So I think we used to talk about this a lot, is like, building.
Yeah. Okay. I know where you're going.
Like, yeah, like not just having your whole brand centered around one individual, because that individual could leave at any time. And then you've built all this brand equity in a human, but not necessarily they're attached to your brand at the time, but then they're going to be attached to another brand and you've done all this work. And so we used to try and think about like, yes, we've got this leader and we'll build a great, story and brand, but who else do we have and how do we tell other stories? And I do think it's like I guess it's less risky with founders because they often, for the most part, are staying with their business for a while. It's theirs and it's like their baby. But for CEOs that move around, doing all this work with an individual on their own platforms that they own, that are not brand platforms, and then they leave. I think there can be a void because sometimes the person that comes in is very different and you've actually built brand equity in the human and not the brand.
Totally agree. Yeah. And I think that there's a delicate line from a comms perspective in walking on that. And I think that's something that wasn't necessarily touched on in the article that is such a great, how much do you want to lean your brand on this one person? But I mean, the same risk goes for if you have like a celebrity endorsement and then they fuck up somehow,
And then they get on a spaceship and go to,
Exactly. So she gives tips in the article of like, here's how you can build your brand and here's what you should be doing. We're not going to go through that. I feel like Fauna did a good enough job that we don't need to go through that in our episode. So
and if you haven't listened to Fauna's episode,
we're not going to
listen to it.
Yeah, no, seriously. In my notes in here, I was like, and point to Fauna. But I think there's a couple things that I want to mention first, and then we can go into kind of like the big hairy questions that she has at the end. Yeah. Okay. So the shift has challenges and annoyances, but there are also some broad benefits to where this could be going. So one, more diverse voices can build platforms bypassing traditional gatekeepers. I think that's definitely
amen if I agree with it.
I know. Yeah. Just comment out loud.
Yes. Agree.
Specialized or niche expertise can find its audience more easily, which I love. I'm all about a niche.
Yeah.
Yep. Knowledge sharing accelerates as more people document their work. You know me, I'm a big fan of that. Professionals with strong personal brands have more career leverage and long-term flexibility. And companies have to treat talent better when employees have their own platforms.
Yeah, I think that one really, I was like, ooh, spicy.
That's spicy.
Yes. I think we've seen this in the last probably couple of years, but is that employees have a very strong voice now and will use their individual platforms to call out their employers if they feel, and we've seen this on social justice issues. We've seen it around layoffs. We've seen it around a bunch of stuff. And I think this is very true, is a lot of these employees have strong followings and it can be very detrimental to your brand if that person is unhappy.
And historically, it was like, oh, I'm just going to go on Glassdoor. But like, who's really going on there unless they're angry? Now it's both sides of the story.
Yeah.
And it's
also,
so public.
And this is showing my age, but like, I would never have dreamed of like, and I've been unhappy in roles, but I would never, and maybe it's the comms person in me, but like, when I was younger, I would not have, I mean, there wasn't the avenues either necessarily. But I think that there's also a cultural shift going on. So it's like the platforms exist and people have these personal brands on these platforms and these followings. But there is a cultural shift as well around expectations at work and what an employer should do for me and what I should get. And so there's this mixing of like, I think the younger generations have a very strong sense of what they want their employers to do around social justice, around flexibility, around a bunch of stuff. And they happen to have these platforms to be like, you know what? I'm just going to call it out. And so like, I think there's this mutual kind of two trends happening and they've merged. And I think if we look back 15, 20 years, you still had disgruntled employees. That's always existed. I think what is changed is I don't think I had the same expectations of my employer that people have today. I didn't expect them to necessarily deliver on that stuff, which is not a good or a bad thing. It's just how it was. And then we also just didn't have these platforms. They didn't, some of them existed, but not really. And it wasn't like we weren't building our personal brands on them. We weren't talking about work.
Yeah. And I think it also creates a really tough situation for like the employee comms and the executive and the management teams of thinking about like, what does a good culture at work look like now? Because some of the things that people are mad about are like coming into the office for 1 day a week, and maybe I'm sounding old, but like,
yeah,
that's not a crazy request. But people can turn it into a like, just gonna go do my coffee badge scan and then leave. Like I see that on TikTok so much of like, scan my badge at 3, like grabbed a free coffee from the cafe and then went home and kept working. And I'm like, well, that's really like doing good by anything. Oh God, I sound old. I need to stop.
I'm just laughing because it's like, yeah, it's resonating with me. But then the flip of me is like, I don't know, these are really hard issues because the other side of me is like, for too long, institutions have had a lot of power and corporate has had a lot of power and employees probably could be exploited a little bit more. And it's this double-edged sword of like, I actually think this age of empowerment and being able to like speak out on platforms and hold employers accountable is good. But to your point, what annoys me is like what they're holding them accountable for. I'm like, that just feels like general work that we should be doing. Like, have we lost the art of hard work? Like, I don't know. That's me being old, is I'm like, do people not work hard anymore? Like, I remember working very, very hard when I was younger and I still work hard now. But I mean, I remember working really hard. Now, I don't know. I don't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing, but I don't remember being mad about it, really.
It makes me think about this one time in a company I was at. There's somebody sent an all company-wide email with like the CEO on it and everything. It said, we're out of hard-boiled eggs in the kitchen.
Yes.
And I was just like, oh my God.
That's empowerment for a while.
And this was like 13, 14 years ago. And so you can imagine how I just died a little inside. But like maybe that's like cool now. I don't know.
I don't know. Well, now it would just be on TikTok.
Yeah, that's true. Which also feels less, it doesn't feel as bad for some reason. I feel like that's fine. And
And
on
all
TikTok.
company email still like makes me fall sick in my tummy.
All right, let's get into the questions that
Yes.
Kira is asking. With she says with her brand hat on.
Hat on. Okay.
So here's the first one with all of this context. Here's the first one. How do we make sure substance isn't overshadowed by style?
Which is kind of what we were getting at of like, don't be wooed by just the personal branding and the following. Like,
Mhm. But also as an employee or like an employer, just because this person has a big, are we saying the same thing? The person
yeah,
has
I
a big
think so.
personal
Like,
brand that does.
basically, let's just make sure they can still do their job.
Yeah, I was like, I feel like I just Katie explained you on accident.
Okay. I like Katie Blaine though. That's
Thank
cool.
you. It could just be talking about yourself. Okay, here's the second thing. How do we balance the need for differentiation with authenticity? If it's not authentic, it won't be sustainable.
Yeah. I think this is one of the key ones is like, as a concept, this all makes sense, right? Like, make your people your brand, get your executives out there. But people will see through it quite quickly if these people are not genuine about what they're doing. So I think you have to find the sweet spot. And this is why I say, like, yes, use your CEO for certain things. But if they're not a natural person who's going to live in this and love it and kind of do it themselves, then it's probably going to come across as inauthentic if you do it over and over and it's comms people kind of driving too much of that.
Yeah.
I think that's when you need to find the people in your business who are naturally doing this anyway. And it might not be about the company. They might be naturally doing it in their personal life, but they might just be really naturals, really good at this, that you can say, actually, this person's going to be a really big asset for our brand. And for this whole idea of people being the brand, let's work with this person. Let's think about where their expertise lies. And then you might have, to your point, people who are already doing this in a work context, like they're big in the developer community or they're big, whatever your niche little area is. I think that's where it's going to have to land, because otherwise, if you're just getting a whole bunch of people in your business to just post and start, trying to build this brand, these personal brands about the company, it's just going to look fake.
Yeah. And I also think this is an interesting one with the creator world in terms of like a consumer perspective too. So having a creator come in, and if you work at a protein powder company and this person sure has a great following, but like, do they actually know about the products and the ingredients and all of that stuff?
Yeah.
Like, where are you actually just kind of like spreading not misinformation intentionally, but like this person's going to create and talk about and like bloating and stuff like that. Like, how qualified are they? And how could that hurt your brand long term?
Yeah. And I think, I mean, we could do a whole episode on that whole industry and how much like inauthentic stuff there is and hard to navigate and hard for people to understand and all of that stuff. But I think you're right. It's like, who are you choosing? And do they have a genuine voice and expertise in some of this stuff? I think is going to be really important for brands moving forward. And I mean, that's been the kind of the case for influencers, I think, for a while, is like, are these people genuinely passionate about this area? And were they doing it before the brand came along? And you can tell the ones that were, and then you can tell the ones that like some brands picked and they're just like, it's just not real. It doesn't feel authentic. This is a slight segue, but I did see something the other day that was about AI generated influencer content.
Yeah.
Where the
Interesting.
influencer doesn't exist. It's an AI generated image. So the example that I saw was for Nivea body cream. And it was saying there's kind of two camps, right? There's the real influencer, but who doesn't actually use the product, or who's kind of been paid to do it, but it's not really, but they're a real human. And then there's the AI version, which obviously can't use the product because it's digital. But is that worse than the influencer who's real, but who also doesn't use the product? And it was a really interesting article because it was like, they're kind of both the same in a way. It's basically saying this is sort of fake content in the sense that one is a digital creation and they're not ever going to use the product because it's not a real human. And then the other one is a human that you've paid that isn't actually using the product, that isn't really interested, that doesn't have authenticity.
Totally.
And so I just thought that was a really interesting comparison, because your natural tendency is like, oh, well, the real human, like that makes more sense. But it's like, I don't know. Like, yeah.
You know what's interesting that you mentioned that, because an example that I instantly thought of was one time I took a picture into my hairdresser and I was like, I want my hair to look like this. And she goes, you know that that's an AI image, right? Like that's not actually a real person. So it was like a person on Pinterest, and I couldn't tell that it wasn't a real photo of someone. And it was somebody that had like my eye color and my skin color and my hair texture. And so I was like, ooh, I want to be this blonde. And she's like, there's no fucking way we're going to get you that blonde. That's actually an AI image. And she was like, people do that all the time. They bring in these photos from Pinterest and they're not real people. And I have to explain to them that like their hair's not going to do that.
That's not real hair. Wow. Yeah. See, I just think, well, anyway, that's a segue because it's, but AI.
The topic for another day. Okay. So the other thing she's asking herself is, what responsibility do platforms like Substack and LinkedIn have in determining who gains visibility and whose content is suppressed? I feel like this is the big question of like what we see on Twitter and what we see, I saw on Facebook and all that stuff as well.
Yeah. I mean, this is sort of that goes back to, talking about the whole diversity piece of all of this is like, how are we making sure that we're still seeing multiple voices, multiple perspectives, different types of people? And I do think some of the algorithms, there's ways to influence the algorithms, as, the episode with Fana we talked about, but there are things that algorithms love. And so if people are doing that, then it's naturally narrowing what you're seeing. So I do think, like how, and I don't know enough about.
It's so funny. I have an example of this. Like I tried to do a post on LinkedIn the other day and it got like 4 likes when like, that's just like not how my content usually rolls.
My content usually is so much better.
Yeah. And I was like, what the fuck is going on here? And I was talking to one of my friends that kind of specializes in this, and she said, oh, well, you put your link in the post. You're not supposed to put your link in the post. You put it in the comment because it's taking you out of the LinkedIn platform, and LinkedIn doesn't want you to leave the platform.
Huh.
And I was like, you son of a bitch.
You little weaselly LinkedIn people.
That's good to know. Yeah, so hot tip, everyone.
So this is what I mean. Like, I think there's going to be, and also just in general, I think these platforms tend to hero certain types of people and certain types of content. So I think we just need to think about that. But yeah, I don't have the answer for it, to be honest.
Yeah. To you, I don't either. I'll ask Devin what she says. Cool. And then what happens to brilliant people who don't want to participate in the attention economy and who find it competes with their right to privacy? Duffy, I was thinking of you when you were talking.
Yeah, when I read that at the end, I was like, yes. This is my big question for all of this as well.
Well, and this is what we talk about with the silent assassins, right? Yeah. Like the people like the Jane Hines who aren't promoting their work, but they're very well respected in the industry because they do great work,
Yes. And and again, like, I feel like in this whole episode, we're showing our age, but like, I really believe in like hard work and like doing a good job and doing the job that you've been paid to do, and I don't know, like, I guess I just worry that like we're moving into this world where a lot of things are lived in the public domain, and I don't necessarily subscribe to that, nor do I want it. And I think there are a lot of people like that. Yeah. I think culturally as well, there's different across different cultures. There's different perspectives on this. There's different comfort levels with putting yourself out. Like, I just think we've got to be careful that we don't continue to just hero people who like that. Because there are really, really smart people who don't want to be on these platforms and who are really, really good at their jobs and really good at what they do. And then on top of this, I think all of this is set in a bubble of the brand and the corporate world. Like, fundamentally, there are lots of jobs where people are not like building their personal brand necessarily, or have the luxury to do that. Like some people are working to feed their families and they're in, jobs where they don't have the time to be also building their personal brand on LinkedIn.
That's such a good point.
I guess, let's
It's such
ground
a
ourselves
corporate
in
bubble.
reality as well. Like,
yeah, this is a corporate bubble problem for sure. Last one, and it's a doozy. What are the political implications when individuals amass more influence than institutions? It's a big one.
yeah, well, I feel like we're seeing that play out a little bit in the States with some of the like tech bros, where it's kind of them as individuals, but sort of representing their companies as well. And then you see the downside of that too, like with Elon and like Tesla tanking. It's like he's unequivocally attached to that brand, but he's acting as an individual, right?
Yeah.
But impacting the brand. And so that's an extreme example. Don't get me wrong. I don't think but I think it's a good example of like, it's hard to separate individual from brand.
Yeah.
And that can be a good and a bad thing, right? There's both ways this can swing.
Did you see the article today about there's like a group of people in France who are suing Tesla because they own Teslas and now Tesla is associated with like a hate symbol?
I did not see that, but wow.
I saw that this morning and I was like, woof.
But I think it's a good example of, and again, all of this is like a spectrum, right? That's the extreme end of the spectrum for sure. Elon is, Elon and it's, but I do think it goes back to that point we were kind of saying about like investing too much in an individual to the detriment of the brand. Yeah. And I think it can be really powerful and really good. And like we see lots of examples of that, right? There's so many great founders and CEOs who, as individuals, the work that they're doing, the stuff that they're doing online really impacts the brand in a positive way. Mm-hmm. But all it will take is one thing that they do, or, and they are still humans. They're going to have personal lives. They're going to have things happen to them. And if you've intrinsically linked them with your brand, then there's going to be a brand impact. And so I think just keeping that in mind is really important as we kind of these people's individual profiles so closely linked to the brand.
Yeah, I think the bottom line is that just personal brand is not going to go away. I think it's just going to evolve in what it looks like. It'll get more sophisticated. Companies will start to lean on it even more than they already are.
And I think like for me, one of the big takeaways is like, putting CEOs aside, maybe we should be looking more at this, like not the old school model of the CEO is the spokesperson. Mm-hmm. They're the only people that can talk about your brand. Like who are these really cool, brand builders in your business who may not be senior, but who have like really interesting stories, who are already on social, who are already doing things that maybe you could untap that. And I think traditionally we've been like very like, we have spokespeople and that's who represents the brand. I just think those days are kind of going now. And I think there are going to be some hidden gems in your business just by the nature of the workforce now that you should be like going, okay, who can we really kind of make, who are probably doing it anyway, and you can just sort of uplift that. People are the brand, Boyson, apparently.
I believe you. Well, that was a lot. Should we lift it up? Do you have a dumb in private?
I've been trying to think about whether I have one or not. I feel like my whole life at the moment is a dumb in private. Like I am literally that duck that is like on the surface, I may look like shit is together, but it is not together behind the scenes. It is not
underwater. Together. It's a flurry of feet.
Feet are just barely keeping me moving along that stream. So like my dumb in private is like, well, it's more just a PSA to people to just remember that like people may look like they got this shit together, but they probably don't.
It's a great.
Life is hard, and I'm exhausted, and good times. So no, I don't really have an overall. That's just my overall PSA for people right now. Like I feel like I've taken on a lot at the moment, and I don't know why I do it to myself. Why?
Sounds like you. I believe it. One? I do. So you're going to love this. I like saved it and said it out loud to Scott earlier. And he was like, yeah, she's going to love that. So I had to make a video for comms people of like a welcome video on the platform.
Beautiful.
And it was literally like, I don't know if you remember that 30 Rock episode where Jack, who's played by
Yeah.
um, Alec Baldwin, has to do like 700 takes to get the corporate video out.
I do.
And he's like, do I put my hands here? I feel like I should hold a mug. And like, it's all these takes.
I
It,
can't.
it took me 38 takes to do this video.
Poison.
Because I was so nervous and I wanted to tell the story. The
Yeah.
script was a little bit long and I wanted to do it in one take because I media train and like do keynote
I
certification
was
for
just about
people.
to say the irony of this is like the chef that doesn't cook for his
Yeah.
family. It's like the
And
media trainer comms person doing 38 takes of her own video.
but then Scott was like, why don't you just chunk it into sections and like pause it?
Yeah.
And then keep going. And I was like, because I should be able to do this in one take. But it was like the lighting was going away, the sun was going down. I was like, oh my God. So I had to do it in chunks and it took me 2 minutes. But I spent like, Scott thought that I was done and that I had moved on to do like other videos for the platform.
You're like, no, I'm still doing
And
my welcome.
I came downstairs. I was like, I can't do it.
Oh, Katie Boyson. You know what it is? It's because you care. It's like your
I
own,
do.
it's your own baby.
Yeah,
And
no, I
it's
gave a huge
if
amount
it
of.
was for like something you weren't like so invested in, you wouldn't have, but it's like when you care that much.
Yeah.
But I think it is also the irony of like, it comes back to like, we don't want to do this shit. Like, this is not our natural habitat. We just want to coach other people to do it. But no,
Totally.
I don't want to
I
film
know.
videos. I don't want to like, which kind of goes through this whole episode. It's like,
Exactly. It's scary. Putting yourself out there is really hard. And so, especially in that capacity where like, people come on the platform and you want.
do you know what? The other irony I found about all of this that we're talking about is like, here I am being like, I don't want to do this stuff. I literally have a podcast. But to me, it's like you and me talking.
Right.
Like, I
Exactly.
always forget that there's people listening, and then like people will message us or like send me, and I'll be like, oh my God, people are actually listening to this.
That's the
That
thing.
makes me super uncomfortable. I love it. Shout out to our listeners. But like to me, I just find it so funny because I just enjoy this and it feels like it's you and I having a conversation. And then I remember that, oh, actually, we are kind of building the irony.
It's so true. It's so true. Okay. Well, if you have a topic or you have something that you want us to talk about, or you have feedback or you have insights into this whole world of personal brand, let us know. You can email us at hello@smartandpublicpod.com, or you can reach us on Instagram or TikTok or YouTube at Smart and Public Pod. And we'll talk to you guys later. Okay.
Bye.
Bye.